Just a few seconds here and then we'll get started. 15 seconds. Welcome everybody. My name is Omar Rope. I am one of the founding board members of the Utah Muslim Civic League. Today's presentation, we have Elisa Black. She's going to be presenting on a path to financial independence, something that I'm really interested in personally. I know a lot of our followers and constituents are as well. I think it's an important topic to gain financial freedom, financial planning, and making the right decisions that we need to be doing, especially right now. It's a difficult time for a lot of people. And I think, today's session is really relevant to, what might be going on with a lot of people's lives today. So I'll give a brief introduction for Elisa, and then before I let her take over and give a further introduction and jump into the topic, we'll let rest of our panelists introduce themselves and we'll go from there. So Elisa Black is the youngest female agent ever to reach broker status with Revolution Financial Management in Utah. She's passionate about helping families and individuals learn how to manage their money and change their futures no matter where they came from. She is helping to lead the company expansion to reach more people throughout the United States and Canada by recruiting and training new agents to help more families. She also loves to sing and is in the A Cappella group, and I love this name, Inversion, and it's based in SLC. So thank you for being with us, Elisa. I'll let rest of our panelists introduce themselves. Abdikadir, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, Abdikadir, I work with UMCL. I do the financial literacy work with them. And I'm a graduate student at the University of Utah. And I know Elisa since my freshman year of college. She's awesome. I'm looking forward to this today. Thanks for being here.
I'll go next. My name is Shema, and I'm a fellow with UMCL.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dahaba Okero. Thank you, Abdikadir, for inviting me to this conversation. I was just really excited, and I'm really intrigued to see everything that we're going to learn today.
Leo, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Feel like you're camera shy.
Hi, my name is Leo. I was invited by Abdi. I don't really know what's going on, but I can't wait to hear what y'all got to say. Thanks for inviting me, Abdi.
Thank you all. Elisa, if you'd like to pull up your presentation and maybe you can talk a little bit more about yourself while you do that as well. Anything else you'd like us to know?
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I'm super fired up and excited to be here. I absolutely love what your organization stands for and everything that you're doing. Everything that I've seen from you guys is just always outstanding and good and so helpful. And I feel honored to be here. So thank you for the invitation. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Well, great. Well, let me jump right in. So yeah, I've been helping people learn about their finances. I do a lot of teaching classes. I do a lot of one-on-one coaching and mentoring with people, both to agents learning to be financial advisors, as well as to families and individuals that are trying to get better financially, trying to figure out their financial life. And so that's what I've become very passionate about, and it's what I love. And my company that I represent is Revolution Financial Management, and we call ourselves Revolution because we really feel like we're changing the industry. So many financial firms are all about just helping the rich get richer, and we're trying to be different, and we're trying to help everybody be able to get ahead, learn the same concepts that the rich know, but let everybody know those concepts and get to learn them. So we're going to talk about a few things here, but then I'll also have my contact information at the end. So if you have questions and you want to email me, I think we're going to do some Q&A and things like that too. But I'm always happy to help, and I don't charge at all. If you want to sit down with me and talk with me and have questions or do anything like that, it's absolutely free to anybody in this group here today. So the main things that I was asked to talk about, one of them is about loans and the good, the bad, the ugly, when to get a loan, why to get a loan, and kind of navigating the world of how loans work here. So first, the most common first loan that a lot of people get is a car loan. And sometimes the debate will happen and people will say, well, should I buy my car with cash or should I get a loan? And so there's a couple of things you want to consider because it's not one answer for everybody. It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So if you're trying to buy a car for the cheapest amount possible, like the paying the least amount, then doing it in cash, paying the full amount up front is going to be the cheapest way to do that. However, there might be situations where you want to do it as a loan. Sometimes that might be you don't have the full amount of cash to pay for the car. But also another thing is that once you start showing that you're good at making payments, like on a car loan, that starts building what's called your credit. And you need good credit in order to get bigger loans for things like houses. So sometimes it's actually better to get the car loan because then that starts building up your credit history, and then that qualifies you for better loans down the road. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like and some things about loans so that you know if you're getting a good loan. So the biggest thing that makes a loan good or bad is the interest rate on it. So every loan has some interest connected to it. And that's how loan companies make their money. If they were just giving free money away in loans, then they would quickly run out of business. So they have to be able to pay their employees. They have to be able to be a profitable business. And so they charge interest. So that's their fee for giving you that money when you needed it. So let's go over some examples here. Let's say we're buying a car for $5,000 and we are going to do it with a loan. So instead of just paying the $5,000 cash, we want to get a loan. If I have a good credit score, I might be able to get an interest rate of 4%. So they're always going to tell you a percentage number when you're getting a loan. And that number is actually very important. Some people are just like, oh, great, I qualified for the loan, awesome. And they don't realize that that number can significantly change how much they end up paying overall. So if I have good credit for a car loan, anything about 5% or lower is really good. If you have good credit score, you'll get something under 5%. I've never seen anything lower than 2.5% for a car loan. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but that just knows if you're qualifying, if they say, oh, you qualified for a loan at about 3% or something, that's really, really good. So what that means is if I have a car loan of $5,000 and I have a 4% interest rate, I'll actually end up paying $6,300 or thereabouts. That's not going to be, I'm not going to give you exact numbers because there's a couple other little factors in there, but that's about what it's going to look like after the 5 years are done, because they do charge that little bit of interest. So that interest ends up being over $1,000 on the car. You don't really see it that way. They just tell you, oh, your car, you qualified at 4%. Your monthly payment is $106 for that $5,000 car. And so a lot of people are just like, okay, great. And they just take it, which in that case, it's not too bad. But if we look at the second example, if you don't have good credit, maybe this is the first time that you're ever getting a loan, or maybe you have bad credit, maybe you haven't been good at paying things on time, you might get a loan with a very high interest rate. 16% interest is very high and very intense. And I wish that car loan people weren't able to make a loan for that much interest, but it is something that I have seen people have even higher than 16%. And what that's doing is it's multiplying how much they're able to have you charge on interest. And so in this example, they might say, oh yeah, you qualified for 16% loan and it's just $175 a month. But over the course of the 5 years of that car loan, you'll end up paying $10,000, not $5,000. So it's important to pay attention to the interest rate. And if somebody tells you, like when you're going to get a car and they say, oh yeah, 16%, great, they're going to act like that's a good thing. And so you just have to be aware that it's not, and then just be like, hey, that's actually not the interest rate I'd like to pay. Can I negotiate that? You have some leverage. So some of the things you can do is you can co-sign on the loan. So maybe you have a parent that has a better credit or somebody else that you know that's willing to put their name on the loan with you, and that might bring your interest rate down. Or another way is to, if you have maybe $1,000, you say, hey, I'll pay, 1,000 of it right now. Can I get a lower interest rate? So you just kind of sometimes have to negotiate a little bit and be willing to stand up for yourself a little bit so that you don't end up paying twice for your car. So that's a little bit about how interest works. We're probably gonna talk a little bit more about it as well. But first I want to talk about, well, how much should you be paying for your car loan? Because this is another thing that I see where people just go into the car dealership and they just say, great, I want this car. And the car salesman says, oh, great, look, you qualify for this car for $15,000 and your monthly payment is going to be $400 a month. And people just accept that a lot of time. They're just like, okay, great. I guess that's how much you pay for a car is $400 a month. However, sometimes I see people paying where like half their money is going towards their car. And it's really hard to get ahead financially in your life if all of your money is going into your car. Now, if a car is something really important to you and you really want a fancy car and that's the most important thing to you in your life, great. There's ways to do it right, and it's not a bad thing to be putting money towards something that you love. But here's some things that might help you know if you're ready for that kind of a car. So a car payment, ideally, in the best case scenario, is not more than 5% of your income. If your car is able to be 5% of your income or less, that car payment, then you're going to be okay. You're going to be able to pay your rent. You're going to be able to buy your groceries and everything like that. It's not going to take over your financial life. So for example, if I make about $2,000 a month, 5% of my income, the way that you figure that out is you take how much you make in the month times 0.05, and that number shows you how much you should pay for your car loan. So in this scenario, if I make about $2,000 a month, my car loan amount, I'm trying to get to about $100 a month. That's my goal number. And you can talk to, when you go in to buy a car, you can talk to them about that and say, hey, I'm looking to get my monthly payment for something about $100 a month. Can you help me out with that? And they'll try to upsell you. They'll try to convince you to do more. And you just have to say, hey, that's what my goal is. I'm trying to be financially smart. Can you help me with that? Or I'll go somewhere else. That's the best way to do it. And as long as you're clear about what your intention is, then they'll help you do that. Now, $100 a month might not get you your dream car, but it'll get you a starting car. And then as you work on increasing your income, then you'll be able to buy a more expensive car or save up and buy a car for cash after you have a home and you don't need to build up your credit anymore. And that's the way to do it cheapest, like we said at the beginning. All right, so now we're going to switch gears and talk about home loans. Another name for home loan is a mortgage. So you'll hear that term a lot. So let's look at, I guess I should have verified if most of you guys are in Utah or not, but I was kind of doing it based upon averages in Utah, and every state is different. So it really depends. If you go to California, average home cost is more like $600,000 or $700,000 for a home. In places like Georgia or I'm drawing a blank. Some more like southern states, though, a lot of times you might be able to get a home for even like $30,000 or $40,000. So I actually know a lot of people that really like to get into real estate. They'll buy homes in other states that are really cheap while still living in Utah or somewhere that's more expensive. If that's something that you're interested in, sometimes you want to look at other states. But that's a topic for another time. Specifically talking about home loans and mortgages. We're looking at the average home cost in Utah being about $275,000. Now, it's a lot harder to have cash to buy a home. You might be able to, pay cash for a car that's $5,000, or even $10,000. homes, it's really hard to get to that point where you're just saving in a bank to get up to $275,000. So we do often get loans or mortgages to buy a home. So what does it take to qualify to buy a home loan? There's a couple of things that are requirements to buy a home. For example, number one, you have to be able to prove that you can afford your monthly payments. Somebody doesn't want to just hand you $275,000 and be like, okay, you're good. They want to make sure that you can pay it back. And so they do check, what's your job? How much do you make every year? For example, if you want to have average home in Utah, about $275,000, they want to see that you make $50,000 at least. That's kind of the minimum amount. And that doesn't have to be from one person. You know, if there's more than one person whose name is going to be on the loan, then it can be those incomes combined. So sometimes it's maybe it's a husband and wife that both work, and one of them makes $30,000 and the other one makes $20,000. As long as it's at least $50,000, then you're in the range to qualify for an average home in Utah. Next, you want to have a credit score that also shows people that you are good at paying for things, that you don't miss payments, that you're good at paying things off. That credit score was also part of what we looked at with car payments. They're checking that too. It's not quite as difficult as with a home loan, but for getting a home loan, you want a credit score of at least 650. But if you want the best interest rate so that you pay the least amount for your home over time, 740 is what you want. If you have anything higher than 740, it doesn't make it any better. And 740, for whatever reason, is the magic number that will get you the best home loans, best deals on buying a home. So that's another piece. Then there's what's called the down payment. So there is, when you're a first-time home buyer, especially, you do have to put some money down. There are some ways around that, but we're not going to get into that today. But usually for your first home, you do need to make some kind of down payment. And there's different amounts that you can put down for your down payment. You can see I listed them there. There's different percentages of a home. I did these percentages based upon the home cost of $275,000. And so just depending on how much money you put down as your down payment changes what your monthly cost will be. And again, these aren't perfectly matched up to these because your credit score also affects it. The higher your credit score, that will lower your monthly payment as well, things like that. So these aren't like perfect numbers, but I did kind of close with some averages. So the more money that you're paying up front, the smaller your monthly payment in general. And it used to be, people used to always say, well, always do 20%, always do 20%. However, home prices are just going up and up so much that and rent is going up so much in Utah that it really doesn't make very much sense. I mean, unless you would like inherit that money or something and like somebody's going to give that to you. In my case, that wasn't the situation when I bought my first home. And so I did the 3% down because I was tired of paying rent and trying to save for a home at the same time. So I said, hey, I'll go ahead and do the payment or the smallest down payment, get into my home. And then after a couple of years, as my home value went up, my equity built, and I paid off some of the home, I did what's called a refinance. And that got me a better loan where I did have 20% of the house paid off at that point. And so now my monthly payment is significantly less than when I first started it. So again, some of these concepts, if it's going over your head a little bit, don't worry about it too much. We're just kind of trying to get an overview, and I'm happy to answer questions as you get closer to these things in your life. But just trying to get some overview. Maybe some of you guys are already looking at this kind of stuff, so I want to just kind of give some look at that. And then the last piece, as far as qualifying for a home loan, is your debts outside of the home loan can't be more than 15% of your income. So we talked about that a little bit with the car, right? If the car is 5% of your income and maybe you have student loans or credit cards or other things, they can't be more than 10%. And so this is where people get shot in the foot sometimes too, because they'll get a car that's like 20 or 30% of their income, and they will not be able to buy a home until that car is paid off because it's more than 15% of their income. So another little step of just kind of having the right perspective with your finances. We want things to be lower. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about that credit score. Just so you can kind of see, okay, well, how do I actually build that credit score so that I, am closer to qualifying for a house? So one of the things is to be making payments towards some kind of loan or a credit card. Now, sometimes we talk about credit cards and it's like, ooh, that's a really scary topic. I don't want to get into a lot of debt, which is good. I want you to have a little bit of fear about credit cards, because one of the things that I work with people is they come to me once they have $20,000 of debt on their credit cards or more, and that's very hard to turn around. So let's talk about what credit cards are. Credit cards are borrowed money with very high interest rates. So you can go to your bank and say, hey, I would like to get a credit card. And they say, great, here's a credit card. And a lot of times your first credit card will be around maybe $200 maximum, sometimes up to $500. Usually that's the starting range amount. So they give that to you. And just by even having that card, you're starting to build credit because you're showing how you handle borrowed money. So these high interest rates that we're looking at with credit cards, they're usually higher than 20%. So they are very high. And that's how they make their money, is because every time you spend money on it, they're going to make their money. So the way that you can use it responsibly to build your credit score and not have to pay the interest is by paying it back every month. So for example, if I get a credit card and the maximum is $200, I never want to spend $200 in the month. I might spend, I'll usually teach people just buy maybe your gas for your car, or pick one thing that you're going to buy every month to put on that card. And so maybe I'll spend $20 a month on gas, and then I just pay that back every month. So I borrow that $20 and pay it right back. And as long as you do that within the month of when you used it, you won't have to pay the interest. And so that's how it can be a positive thing for you. You just use it a little bit, pay it back every month. Good credit cards do things like giving you cash back. So you can actually make money by using credit cards. Some cards that are not super great are cards from like clothing stores, because when you're making purchases at a clothing store and you get a card, people that are going to give you a home loan are going to think, oh, were you just desperate and that's why you got a credit card from a clothing store, because you just really wanted those shoes or something. And so some cards are better than others. Cards that give cash back. If you're somebody that likes to travel a lot, you might get an airline card to start racking up points for airlines. I have one of my cards is like that. And so I actually flew me, my mom, and two of my sisters to Florida last summer for free because I had enough points piled up on my card. And that's what I do. I just use it every month to pay some bills and always pay it back every month to kind of build up those points. Another way to build your credit score is simply always paying your bills and loan payments on time. That's a huge part of building your credit score, whether that it's a credit card, whether it's a loan, a car loan, anything, as long as you're paying it on time, that builds your credit score. The longer you have the loan or credit card also builds your credit score. So a lot of times when you're trying to get a home, they're going to look at 4 years. What have you been doing the last 4 years? And then also having different kinds of accounts helps as well. So let's say you've had a car loan, you've maybe had a credit card and maybe a student loan. Like those are examples of different kinds of accounts. There can be other kinds of loans. I've seen people they'll just go to their bank and say, hey, can I have a loan of $1,000? And the bank says, sure. And then they take that $1,000, put it in their bank, and then just every month pay the loan back. They don't even use that $1,000 of the loan. They just pay it right back to build their credit score. That's another idea for having one of the accounts to build your credit score. Okay, I know I'm probably getting close on my time here, but there's one more thing that I wanted to cover, and that is a little bit about starting your own business. A couple of things to consider. I love that this is a topic that's of interest to this group. I think starting your own business is so important. There's way more tax write-offs that you get by being a business owner. Even if it's like a side business, not your full-time thing, you can save a lot of money on taxes by being a business owner. That's also more potential for growth. You grow more as a person. There's so many good things that come with owning your own business. However, there's some concerns that come with starting a business. And this is why, even though most people want their own business, there's burnout, or the business doesn't make it, or there's just a lot of things that happen. And so it's important to be considering these as you're starting a business. So number one, what is it going to cost me? You know, what's my investment that I'm going to have to pay to get it started? And if you don't know, Google's a great place for that. You know, research what other people have done in order to, you know, start a business that you're interested in. You know, like if you want to start a restaurant, you know, Google what, you know, something similar to the restaurant that you want and see what people say. You know, if you want to own like a franchise, like a McDonald's or a Subway or a Chick-fil-A or something like that, you can look up, you know, how much money that's going to cost you to get something like that going. So that's important to know. You also want to know the time, how long it's going to take until you make money. A lot of businesses take some years before they make money. And so if you don't have, you know, money up front, you're probably going to have like a part-time job at least while you're getting something going so that you can pay the bills in the meantime. And so you just keep your expenses low and just make sure you're making enough money to cover that as you're building your business. And that's normal, that it takes a number of years to really be making the money. That's another reason why people burn out, because they're like, oh, I thought I was going to be a millionaire after year one. Well, even companies like Amazon weren't making money in their first 5 years. So you do have to give it time. And if you get a business loan, you need to be super smart with that. Because one of the issues that I see is people get these loans for these businesses and they're like, oh, I've got the money, you know, I'll just maybe use some of that money for some fun things as I get this business going. And then they end up using that whole loan and they're still not making money. And then what happens is they go bankrupt because they can't pay for their things. And when you go bankrupt, it's then very, very hard to buy things like a car or a house. It's next to impossible for at least 7 years. So you've got to be careful that you're being smart with the loans that you're getting, that you're not just spending that money on whatever. If it's a business loan, you put it towards business things and you work your butt off until you can get there, until you're making money. What do I need to know to start the business? You know, and for some businesses, you might need some schooling. Other businesses, you might just need a mentor, you know, somebody that's been there, done that, and finding somebody to coach you on that, you know, and how much are you going to have to pay them? You know, that's usually you have to pay a mentor. Will people want or need what you're going to be selling? You know, that's important to consider. You know, maybe take a survey of people around you, you know, say, would you pay for this thing if I started it as a business? Is there competition for your business ideas? You know, is there other people doing the same thing? And how are you going to stand out? And then the last thing is, you know, what if I put in all this time and money and it doesn't work out? You know, am I okay with that? So just some of the things to consider. I don't want it to scare you away from being a business owner. I just want you to be smart about it so that you don't end up going under like a lot of businesses do. If you take the time to plan it out really well and really be disciplined, then being a business owner is one of the most rewarding things in life. I grew up, my dad is a business owner. We have the opportunity within our firm to kind of build our own agency within our company. And it's so fun to just be your own boss and not have to, like, I go to work when I want to go to work. Nobody's telling me I have to go to work, and I love that. My last thing that I just want to cover is something also with doing your business is what's called nailing your pitch. So your pitch is like kind of what your business is. So if somebody says, hey, what do you do? Your pitch is what you say. And so you want to get really good if you want to be starting a business at being able to articulate and tell somebody about your business. So one of the biggest things is just practice saying it out loud, you know, over and over and over again. Say, hey, my business is going to be selling little cactuses. You know, how do you make it unique? You know, how can you tell somebody in 2 minutes, you know, about your cool business idea? And so getting really confident with saying that will open up a lot of doors for you as well. So, you know, being able to be confident, you know, stand up straight, look somebody in the eye and be able to say, hey, this is what my business is. that is a huge thing for opening doors, because a lot of times as you share what your business is, people might say, oh, I know somebody that has a farm growing cactuses. You might want to talk to them, or things like that. You might just build the connections that you need to start your business, or you might find the perfect clients. So as a business owner, it's very important that you become very good at just opening your mouth and sharing what it is that you do, who you are, and even before it's an official business, starting to share with people, hey, this is my idea. And that can be very vulnerable and intimidating sometimes. Maybe people will laugh because they're like, wait, you think you can do that? There's sometimes some pushback that family might even give to you. But if you can just be confident and push through, I promise you it's super rewarding to be a business owner. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. Here's my email if you have, and my website. If you have questions or things that you want to know more about, or if you want to set up a one-on-one appointment or something like that, just go ahead and reach out to me and I'm happy to meet with you. So thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you, Elisa. That was.
Thank you. That was great.
I think we do have some questions that we can jump into. Well, I had one question first. So I know that there's auto loans that you kind of went over, and then there's also personal loans. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the difference between those two, and when would you actually take a personal loan? And do you recommend doing that?
Great question. The biggest thing that I see with personal loans is that they have very high interest rates usually. And so that's the biggest thing that you want to pay attention to is, if I'm going to go and get, maybe I'm even like, oh, I'll just get a small loan, maybe just $2,000, but that interest rate is like 30%. After about 2 years, you're going to end up paying more like $4,000 or $5,000 back, which is insane. And so that's the things you have to be paying attention to. Do I need the loan badly enough that I'm going to end up paying for it twice, to give it back? There are situations where a personal loan is necessary and is a good thing. And maybe you can find one maybe at a bank where it doesn't have super, super high interest rate. Maybe even finding something for, a low interest rate, maybe around the 4 or 5%. And that personal loan is going to pay for a car, or it's going to pay for, a business or something like that. In that situation, if you can find one that gives you a really good interest rate and you're confident on being able to pay it back, then that might be a good reason to do it. If it's just to get a loan to go on a trip, I would strongly discourage that. I think that a trip is something that you can save up for. But if it's something like a car loan and maybe you're not finding a very good interest rate for a car loan, but you do find a good personal loan, or if it's for a business or something like that, you just have to really consider it beforehand. Like, is it really worth it to get this loan, or am I just want money because I want money now? Great question. Thank
you. I think Abdi Kadir or Shema has the next question.
Yeah, I have a question. I know you touched a bit on credit cards, but I was wondering if you had any opinions on like maybe what's the best credit card to get as like a college student, or like what's the best maybe starter credit card?
Yes, great question as well. The best starter credit card would be one just from a bank, where it's just, you just go in and say, hey, I just want to start building my credit. Can I get a small credit card? And don't let them give you one that's super big. Like, just say, hey, $200 on it or $500 on it is plenty. Because sometimes they'll try to push one on you, be like, oh, get this, we'll give you one for $1,000. And sometimes that makes the temptation too strong to use it incorrectly. So I would just say, hey, no, I just like to build one while I'm in college, just something small. But a bank is a great place to start. In fact, that's probably, you might have to start there. Sometimes people try to get a card somewhere else and they're denied. And they're like, why am I denied? I don't have bad credit, but it might just be because you have zero credit history. They don't have any proof that you're good at paying things or not, but a bank will always give you a credit card. Well, 99% of the time they'll give you a card. So that's a great place to start, is just with one at the bank.
Thank you. And then I have another question, if that's okay with everyone. But I was wondering if you could talk about like the difference between debt management and debt settlement.
Sure. So it kind of depends on some definitions, but debt management might be simply, being able to take care of it, being like, okay, I'm managing my debt, I'm making my payments, I'm even putting some extra towards my debts or something like that. That would be just managing your debt. Then there's debt settlement, and there's also debt negotiation. There's a couple of these other different words that are connected with debt. And those are for situations where maybe the debt is out of control and now I need help. I'm drowning in the debt. I need somebody to help me with settling or negotiating with credit card companies or with lenders to see if I can get, maybe something settled. That's why it's called like a debt settlement, where we say, hey, I've been paying on this loan. So let's see, the best example that I have of this one, I worked with a client where she had about $20,000 of credit card debt spread out on 5 different cards. And she was paying her monthly payment every month, just paying the minimum every month. And almost 20 years had gone by, and the credit card, like the loan amount, had not gone down at all. But she's paying these minimums every month, and it's just not going down. She's been paying it for 20 years, and it's almost $20,000. So during those 20 years, she had paid almost $40,000 towards her credit cards, but because the interest rates were so high, it never paid them off. It just kept them up high. And so we did some debt negotiation with her where we called the credit card companies and said, hey, look, she's been paying these for this amount of time, and this is how much it is. And so then you work with them, and sometimes they're willing to kind of work with you and be like, oh yeah, it's true, you have been paying that for 20 years. All right, if you just pay us $1,000 more, we'll waive the other 4,000 or something like that. I mean, it's not like it's magic. You still usually have to do something, but sometimes there's processes that help make it a little bit more manageable. Or sometimes we'll be like, hey, can we lower the interest rate on this card that she's had for a really long time? And so many companies will work with you on that too. And you can do that on your own behalf. You don't necessarily have to have somebody doing it for you. You could call and say, hey, I'd like to figure out how I can lower this interest rate on my card. I just feel like it's overwhelming. Are you willing to work with me, or things like that? And so there's different programs for negotiation or settlement or things like that that are a little bit more intense and a little bit more for if you're in a bad situation. So in some cases, though, you still might be to a point where it's just never going to happen. And so you do have to do bankruptcy, which is not fun, but you usually try to do debt settlement or debt negotiation first before that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. When you're starting a business, it's like taking out a loan. Is that like the best approach, or what are like the best practices to like kickstart a business in terms of like funding? I know most people take out loans for businesses, but like, what's the best approach to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot more processes actually than a lot of times people realize. I think that just in our day and age, you actually have more options than just taking out a loan. And some of those options are, if you guys have ever heard of like crowdfunding, there's programs online where you can pitch your idea. So that's one of the reasons why it's so important to get good at your pitch, where you can show people, hey, this is, on the internet, hey, this is my idea. Would you back me? And you can get people to put money towards you to be able to make your business happen. You have to be very good with those funds, right? Those are people that believe in you, that are giving you money because they want to support your business. And so you want to make sure that they're going to be tracking how you manage it because they're going to want to make sure that you're being smart with that money. But then that's not a loan. Like, you never have to pay it back. They might become shareholders in your business, meaning that they kind of hold some ownership within your business, kind of like stocks on a small scale. but that's a great way to do it. There's also, you can find angel investors. And angel investors is a great way to do it, where it's somebody, if you guys have ever seen like Shark Tank, it's a lot like that, but for like not dramatic, not TV, where they're people that are a lot of times local in your state, that you show them what you want to do. And if they like your idea, they'll not only give you the money, they'll mentor you and show you how to do it. So there's a lot of successful business owners that have money that they want to invest in other businesses, because they know if your business is profitable, they're going to make money. And so there's angel investors that they're constantly helping businesses start up. And if it goes under, they just swallow it like it's, so they are sometimes strict, right? You can't just have like a half-made idea where you're like, oh, I would like to kind of maybe do this. No, you've got to get to the point where you're like, hey, this is my business. Here's my PowerPoint slideshow presentation. Here's how I know it's going to work. I just need a coach now and the money. And if you can be really solid, like I need, $60,000 because it's going to do this, this, and this for me. The more clear you can be about your goal, the easier it is to get investors. So angel investors, that's a really good one as well. Crowdfunding, angel investors. And before you get a loan for your business, I would do that same thing. If you don't want to go the angel investor route, I would still, for yourself personally, write out, okay, I'm going to ask for a $10,000 loan. This is exactly what I'm going to do with that money. And maybe even if you don't have a business partner, maybe have somebody that you're accountable to, whether that's a parent or a friend, and be like, hey, I'm going to go get this $10,000 loan and I'm going to spend it exactly like this for my business. Please help me be accountable. Like, I'm going to check in with you, like just check in with me every month and make sure I'm not like blowing this money going out to eat, right? Like, have a good game plan before you go and get that loan, so you know exactly what it's going to do and how you're going to pay it back.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dabo has a question.
I have a question. One, thank you so much for this conversation. Like, it's very insightful.
Good.
At the beginning of COVID, I was actually looking a lot into financial independence. So I'm really glad I got to attend today. And my first question is, I've heard a lot about like Roth IRA in terms of like becoming or going on this path for financial independence. And I was just wondering, could you talk a little bit about that and like the relevance of it for at least like younger adults? Like, when should we start thinking about it, or just any advice I guess you have on it?
Yeah, so investing and saving, that's actually my favorite stuff to talk about. It's important to talk about loans and debt, right? And all those things, but that's not what makes you get ahead with wealth, right? That's just, we need some of those basic things in our lives. And a lot of times that's, very important, just getting into a home, having a sustainable life. But I think eventually it's a great goal to have that goal of independence, financial independence. And the definition of financial independence is when the money your money makes can pay all the bills. When you no longer have to work because your money is able to make enough money for you to be sustainable, then that's when you hit financial freedom. That's when it's independent, when work is an option, you don't have to do it. And so that's when you start to get into the discussion of, okay, where do I start putting some money to have it get to a point where it's doing that for me, where it's growing, where it's, safely increasing and getting to a point where I have the savings necessary to be able to stop working one day. So as far as what kind of things you should invest in, IRAs are one of the options. And what IRAs are is a combination of stocks and bonds. And we're not going to go into all the details of what those are right now. That would be a discussion for another time. But it's basically, you're putting money into it. And then if the market is doing well, you'll grow your money. And if the market does not do well, you can lose money. So it kind of does some up and down growing and everything like that. But in most cases, you're going to end up with more money than if you just set it in the bank. So a bank does not grow at all. It has, that's a huge part of knowing, like, yeah, how much should I be saving? Well, it's like, well, what are your goals? You know, if I want to be a millionaire by age 50, you know, I better start figuring out what to do with that. And so the more that you're able to save, the more likely you're going to get to that goal. And then saving it in the best places will also help. There's not a one size fits all when it comes to investing and saving. Like I was saying, there's so many different options for where you can put your money. I usually don't recommend one thing, like just be like, oh, you should all do this, because for me, I have to be like, okay, what are your goals? What are we trying to achieve? Okay, let's look at what strategies we want to do. But yeah, a Roth IRA is a good option, but just making sure you understand that the money does go up and down. If it's Roth, that means you do not pay taxes on it later on, which is good. If it's just a traditional IRA, that means you're still going to have to pay taxes on it later on. So I will say, if you have the choice, like sometimes jobs will give you a 401k and you can either pick Roth or traditional. Go with Roth. It'll save you money down the road. So sorry, that's a lot of things. That's probably all I should probably say about it at this point.
No, that's really, like, I appreciate it, because like I've been reading articles and things like that, and it's just, I feel like a lot of people use certain language that's just like not accessible, or like just like not simple. So I really appreciate that, just like even the general background of it. And I was gonna ask another question of, you spoke about credit cards and like applying to for a credit card. I've heard that going through like a credit union would also be a good way to get a credit card. Is that something that you think is a good investment, or would that be like a waste of time when you're just trying to get a credit card for like the first time?
Yeah, that's a good distinction. When I said bank is the best place to get your first credit card, credit unions, same thing. Credit union or a bank, I kind of use those interchangeably. Either one should work. So if you even already have, you're already, have a bank account or, an account at a credit union, just go there first. Be like, hey, I'm already, a client here. Could I just get a little credit card to start building that account up? And honestly, definitely, if you feel like you can be smart about it, I would say get a credit card sooner rather than later. That was the biggest thing that held me back from getting my home, was I didn't get a credit card till I was almost done with college. And then I had to wait 4 years to build up some credit history. And even then they were like, okay, this is kind of young, like your account is small. And so my sister and I bought our first house together because we couldn't, like neither of us had enough credit built and down payment built and everything to do it alone. Which honestly, a house is a big responsibility. So I'm grateful now that it wasn't just me. Yeah, so even like my kids one day, I'll probably get them credit cards when they're like 12. I just won't tell them about it, but it'll just start building them some history so that by the time they're ready for things like cars and houses and stuff, they'll have some credit history built.
And my last question is just, I think like in terms of talking to people about credit card, I know within like certain communities, there's a distrust or kind of just like a fear towards credit cards or credit in general. Have you had any encounters with that, or how would you simply go about talking about credit cards and just like the importance that they have within like the US?
Yeah, that is huge, right? Especially if you're not used to things. And I know potentially even like talking about interest might be a really hard topic. It's something that does run this country though. And so that's the tricky part. So anytime we're getting a loan, right? Anytime we're buying a car or a home, we have to pay interest. And so it's really important that we're also earning interest, or we're just not going to get ahead, because we're going to have to pay it if we're getting a home or something like that. So we need to make sure our money's earning it as well. You can either pay interest or you can collect interest, or navigate it both. That's how the world here works. And so when we look at things like credit cards, I think the reason why, a lot of people are anti-credit cards is because people do fall into major debt that way. They're like, oh, it's free money, and oh, I just need it for this, or oh, I just, need it for that. It happens a lot at Christmas time where families will be like, I want to buy Christmas presents. And then they end up with a lot of credit card debt, or just different holidays and events, right? Where that happens. And then they get into a place where they can't pay it off. And so I don't want to be like, oh, credit cards, it's not a big deal. No, they can be a very big deal. I spend time with my job helping people try to get out of the mess that they made. And so I don't want to say like it's not good that people have that fear, right? Because they don't want, especially if it's parents, right? They don't want to have you end up in a worse position than you're at. But if you can learn to do it responsibly, I think that's the biggest thing. If we can help educate, maybe our families on how it is necessary to build credit to buy things like a home, and your game plan for being responsible, maybe being like, hey, this credit card is one of the ways that's going to build my credit so I can buy a home, and I'm going to use it responsibly like this. I'm only going to put $20 on it and then pay it back every month. If you can kind of show your game plan for how you're going to do it, I think that can maybe start building up some trust. But that one is, that's a hard thing, especially if it's not something that's been a normal part of somebody's life, and then trying to add it in, right, is tricky. So we'll get there little by little, right? We do classes like this. We're doing things to help build the education. And as people like your guys' generation starts doing it responsibly and starts getting ahead, right? That's going to inspire everybody else to be like, oh, look at what these guys are doing and it's working, right? Then they're going to get ahead. So as long as you're responsible with it and are being patient with people and talking them through it, I think that's going to be part of what really makes the difference. I don't know a ton about that subject necessarily, but that's the best I can think of right now to answer your question.
No, thank you. That was amazing. Thank you.
Sorry.
So I have a question.
Great.
So earlier you talk about what's it called, car loans and financing, all that. Can I refinance my car loan, and what are some pros and cons?
Great. Yep, that's a good question. So refinancing, when you refinance something, you're changing from your old loan to a new loan. So for example, maybe I got a car and, I'm just hearing this today, right? And I didn't realize that, I got a 15% interest loan, and I'm now like, oh my God, I'm going to pay for my car twice before I pay it off. You might be thinking that right now, right? So what you can do is you can refinance. You can go to a bank or a credit union, or even online. You can kind of just like shop through different places that might do refinances. And actually, UCCU, Utah Community Credit Union, they usually have really good car loans. So that would be one to consider if yours isn't through there. So a refinance is where you go and say, hey, I would like to get a better loan for my car or for my house or whatever it is. And then they let you know if they will give you a better offer than what you're already doing. And a lot of times a refinance will make it so that you have a lower interest rate. So you'll pay off your car sooner, or like it'll be less. And then your monthly payment will go down as well. So refinancing is a good thing. Now, usually you cannot refinance in your first year of your purchase. So if you buy a car in this month of January, you most likely will not be able to refinance until next January. And there's usually some cost involved with refinancing. Like you do have to kind of, like they might put a little bit more back onto the loan. But if it makes your interest rate go down a lot, that's huge. I'll just give you this example. I got my home loan originally at about 4.5%. My first loan for the house, and I had only put down that 3% on the home, and I was paying about $1,800 a month for it. But then beginning of this year, rates dropped a lot and my home value went up. So I went to go get a refinance. So I'd had the house for about 2 years, I think, something like that. And I went to do a refinance. Now, the cost of my refinance is or no, okay, I had had the house 1 year by the time I had done the refinance. Because what they ended up having to do is it went back from, so I got a 30-year loan and it went down to 29 years. It went back up to 30 years. So it's almost like I didn't have that year of that house by doing the refinance. So there is some cost involved. However, that I was able to drop my interest rate from 4.5 down to 2.5, which is really good for a house. It dropped my monthly payment to $1,400 a month. So $400 less a month that I have to do. Plus that interest rate is going to save me about $150,000 over 30 years. That's what interest does. 4.5% down to 2.5% on a home loan. That's the difference of $150,000. So long term, it was way better for me to refinance, even though I'm going to have to repay for that year of the house. It's saving me hundreds of thousands, over $100,000 on the house. So there's little things like that. If you can lower your interest rate, lower your monthly payment, then a refinance is great.
I kind of have a follow-up question to that. A lot of times, or I've heard recommendations that if you are applying for a home loan or a mortgage, that it's sometimes good to have other types of loans and not just like a credit history through credit cards. Is that something you recommend having? If we are in the financial situation to purchase a home through a mortgage, do you recommend getting a car loan or a personal loan to kind of build that more credit history, or what are kind of your recommendations or thoughts around that?
Great. So that kind of goes back to the question about building your credit score and having different kinds of credit. And that is true. When they are going to look at giving you a home loan, they're going to look at the different kinds of credit that you have. And so having something that's different than a credit card, such as an auto loan or a student loan or a personal loan, will look good for buying a home. And it's just kind of interesting because a lot of times we're like, well, we don't want debt. We're trying to avoid student debt. We're trying to avoid these different things. Yet that's how home lenders see if you're good at paying things off. And so just imagine, I'm the bank, right? And somebody's saying, hey, can you give me $275,000? If I'm the banker, I'm not just going to be like, oh yeah, sure, here you go. I've got to make sure that I'm going to get my money back. And so that's why they check and they see, are you good at making payments? And if you've never paid for a car loan or a loan of any kind, then it's hard for them to be like, I don't know if this person's going to make regular payments. The credit cards help, and that's a good start. And oftentimes you need a credit card before you can get a car loan. And so that's important. But a credit card isn't very regular, usually. I mean, if you try to manage it regularly, where it's like, I always do $50 and I always pay back $50, something like that helps, but it's just not something regular. Like every month, this is the payment and he pays it back. That's the kind of thing that they want to see you're good at paying for things. So it's kind of tricky. You have to get good at managing the little debt to be able to get into the bigger debt of like a home kind of a thing. So good question. These have all been really good questions, you guys.
Sorry, I have one more question before we finish it off. I wanted to know, like, when clients come to you, what does that look like? What does it look like when clients work with you? You and your company, and how does that, like, what work do you guys do for them?
Yeah, so right now it's 100% on Zoom because of COVID. And so we just set up a Zoom appointment. And the first appointment, we talk about, okay, what are your financial goals? What are you trying to accomplish? And where are you at? So we usually go through, okay, this is how much you make. This is, what the debts are. This is, what it all looks like. And now I know the goals as well. And then we set a second appointment to then come back with recommendations. So the first appointment is just to see, okay, what do you want? And then nobody's the exact same, right? Not everybody has the exact same goals. Not everybody has the exact same dreams. So in that moment, I don't know what to recommend you. So first I have to get to know you a little bit, see what your goals are, see where you're at. And then I set a second appointment to then go through and show you some recommendations. And so that whole process is free, and you can look at the recommendations. And if you want to go forward with something, then I help you with that. And if not, then that's also okay. So it's pretty chill process.
So I have two more questions, actually. I know we still got a little bit more time, but so especially now, there's a lot of people getting laid off. There's a lot of financial hardship for people during the pandemic. What are your kind of recommendations for saving for those types of situations? Having a rainy day fund. I know there's like a lot of rules of thumb, like some people say 3 months, 6 months. I don't know if there's a hard or fast rule. Like, what do you recommend we do now to prepare ourselves for something that could happen to us in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, a lot of this has hit a lot of people, right? It's been rough, and that question of building an emergency fund or the rainy day fund, I think it's very important to have that, you know, that just in case money. And, you know, honestly, I wouldn't say there's a hard, fast rule about it. The idea is to have money in reserve in case, you know, you lose your job or whatever it is, right? And so I generally start people out, if they're not used to saving in that way, they're not used to having an emergency fund. I usually say, let's set a goal of 3 times your income. So if you make $2,000 a month, we want to try to get a savings of up to $6,000 a month. That's your just in case money. And the way that you build that up is just being very consistent every month, putting aside the same amount of money, paying that towards that fund. And so usually I say about $25. You can just do $25 a month, start building up that emergency fund. Now that emergency fund is different than your long-term financial independence money. And you have to keep them separate from each other, because otherwise, if you have to keep dipping into your long-term savings, you're never going to get ahead, because that long-term money needs to compound, needs to grow, needs to build. And so you do want that rainy day fund, that emergency fund, to be separate than the long-term. And so a good rule of thumb is if you can just do even $25 to $50 a month into the emergency fund, and then towards the long-term money, your long-term amount, you want to get up to 10% of your income. The people that are happiest in retirement, or, you know, getting down the road where they want to stop working, if they were able to save 10% of their income from their, you know, 20s and on, they're going to be okay. They're going to be in a place where they can stop working and live the life that they want to. That's generally what it is, at least 10% of your income. So that was kind of an extra, talking more about long-term money too, but.
What I was wanting to know. So I would like to ask our guests when I do things like this, especially for this topic, if we're beginners or introduction, what books do you recommend reading? What are your favorite books in this space to help us learn more and you know, increase our knowledge?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that you guys are into that. For business building, if you're like, you know, wanting to start a business and go that route, which even if you're like, I don't think I want to do that, still think about it a little bit. Like, just give it some thought, because honestly, that's what the American dream is, like being your own boss, you know, kind of a thing. And that's what this country's all about, is making that happen. And so there's nothing wrong with being an employee. I have an uncle who's a millionaire who's an employee. So, I mean, you can still make a lot of money working for somebody else. Anyways, that was kind of a tangent. But for business building, I really like the book Think and Grow Rich. That one's kind of an intense read. I honestly try to read it multiple times because it's a harder one. But another one that I really like is, oh goodness, the Magic of Thinking Big. Is that what it's called? The Magic of Thinking Big. Yes, that one's really good too, for just expanding the way you think, thinking bigger, thinking more, so that you're not scared of making money. because that's also something that holds people back, especially if you come from a family that they haven't been like super wealthy. You might actually have some mental blocks to making money. And so if you can expand the way you think, then money will come to you more easily. And so that's getting more into like the mental side of things. But money is kind of a mental thing. You know, we talked about fears that are involved with things like debt or credit cards, right? It's feelings that are connected with money. And so the more that we can understand how we feel and think about money too, the more we can make changes towards what we want. So the magic of thinking big is a good one for business and money, I guess, too. I'm trying to think what books I probably have in here too. Those are the two main ones that I like. Oh, also Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That's a good one as well. That one's especially if you want to learn more about real estate too. The guy who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he has really changed the world in his real estate ideas too, kind of a thing. But also just business in general. He shows you how to think like a business owner, because he grew up, it's a story of a man who, his dad was a professor of business, but was always poor. And his friend's dad never went to college, but was super rich. So he kind of shows you the side-by-side thinking. How do rich people think versus poor people think, you know, and kind of comparing that. It's really cool. So those are the books about business growing. And then as far as finances goes, there's a book called How Money Works. That's a good one. Most of the books that I recommend to people with finances are more on like the retirement side, like the savings side of things. So that might not be quite an entry level. I don't know if I should share some of those. Maybe I'll just throw a couple of those out there if you're like really into reading and saving and stuff like that. But there's a book called Leap Before You Lerp. And LERP is spelled L-I-R-P. P as in Paul at the end, Leap Before You Lerp. That one talks about some specific products too that a lot of people don't know about. So that one's a good one for knowing about some investment options. And The Power of Zero. That's another book, more advanced. That one's about taxes and how taxes work in the United States as far as investing. So some of these are maybe a little bit more heavy, but it's the way to get wealthy sometimes, right? Is just knowing about some of these concepts. And if you can understand how the taxes work in the US, that can save you a lot of money as well. Sometimes I'll meet with clients where they're like, I thought I was a multimillionaire. And then when I pulled the money out of my investment, half of it went to taxes. So understanding taxes is an important thing too. So those are a couple of them. I'm sure I'll think of more as soon as we like stop the call. So maybe I'll text Avi and he can tell you if I think of other ones, but those are some to get started.
You can leave it in the comments as well in our Facebook videos. So those are all great recommendations. Thank you. I'm excited to check those out. Thank you, Elisa, so much. This was very insightful and helpful. I personally learned a lot, and I think this is a great way to kick off some of our financial literacy series. We will have more videos on this topic and a part of this series. If you liked what you saw, please like our video, share it on Facebook. And I do want to point out we have another event, part of our mental wellness series, this Thursday at 7 p.m. It's on toxic masculinity. So we'd love for all of you that watch this video to join in for that as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a good evening. Goodbye.
Thank you, Alyssa.